Hello, everyone, and welcome to this, our fourth in a series of webinars in which we have a detailed look at a certain part of the wealth management industry. As the vaccination rollout continues to go well and things finally begin to look like they are opening up again, we thought for this webinar it would be useful to go back and look at some of the things that firms have done during the pandemic and have helped them, and look forward to what they are planning for the future and what the, if I can use this phrase, new normal might look like post-COVID. I'm pleased to say that Melanie Stancliffe, an employment partner at Cripps Pemberton Greenish, will join us to talk about what things will look like from a legal point of view for your business. Secondly, Prash and I conducted some wide-ranging research, speaking to a number of wealth management firms, from boutiques to well-established countrywide and international firms, asking them a set of questions covering what the pandemic has looked like for them and what they think the future will hold on topics as diverse as growth, the future of working from home, and even actual office space itself. Prash and I have then spent some time going through those answers and data and put together what we hope will be a useful snapshot of where the industry is now and what we think are likely to be both its biggest challenges and successes going forward. Finally, I will host a panel discussion in which Melanie will also be joining us alongside Eric Moe, the COO of investment management firm Whiteford, and Sophie Forrest, founder and managing director of Forest HR, the HR support and solutions firm who help a number of financial services firms across a wide range of HR issues. So, as I promised, to get started, I would like to introduce Melanie Stancliffe, who is an employment partner at Cripps Pemberton Greenish. They're a leading multi-award winning practice based both in the City and Tunbridge Wells, nationally recognised for its work in real estate, family, private wealth, and of course, most importantly for us, employment. So over to you, Melanie.
Thanks, Dan, and thank you to Parkwell for having me back again. It's a delight to be with you this afternoon. So there's three things I want to cover in our time together at the start. First of all, it's the current trends that we're seeing amongst our business clients. Second of all, how you deal with the vaccination question. And then thirdly, just talking about the implications legally of hybrid working. So the first slide, if I may, Nick. The first thing that we're seeing is that the pandemic has caused a huge shift in the attitude towards remote working. Nick, if we could have the first slide, next one, that's great, thank you. We're unlikely to be returning to the office in the way that we have before. It's demonstrated that employees can be trusted, that they can work productively, and we are seeing the fact that this is going to shift us on a permanent basis towards more blended working, working in the office and working from home. And that can offer the best of both worlds. For staff, many of them will want to work from home. Every survey that we're seeing, including the one I've shown from YouGov, shows that staff particularly are interested in working from home, and especially those who work in London. Next slide, please. The benefits to staff, well, they're well known. First of all, we're dealing with work-life balance, removing the commute. Greater collaboration is said to be an achievement, and also greater motivation. So staff are saying that they are more loyal, more engaged, and more productive. And many employers are expecting their staff will want to continue to work from home at times. 40% of employers surveyed said half their staff would want to work on a blended basis. And this helps staff to co-locate. They might co-locate within the UK, or they might want to work across border. And many businesses are seeing staff who want to work from other member states in the European Union. Now, this has advantages. You have greater access to talent. You'll be able to retain staff who you know are doing the job very well. But it does have other implications. You need to think about payroll, the right to work in the country where they are going to be living, whether any social charges will be due in that country, and also whether there are any local laws that will impact on your ability to manage them or create obligations for you that you may not have ordinarily had to do. So if we can look at the next slide. If we are returning to work, and many of us are already doing that, going back to the office at least part of the week, then we have to think about our risk assessments again. This is part of the duty of care that we owe to staff for their mental well-being, their physical well-being, and the hands, face, space remains the government requirement at the moment. We know that the government has issued specific workplace guidance, and for offices, that's basically regular hand washing, cleaning, face coverings, screens, one-way systems, all of the things that we'll have put in place and continue to be operating. Notwithstanding the numbers of people out in the city, the guidance officially is that we should be only doing essential travel, and if staff can continue to work from home, they should. Next slide, please. As we return, we need to be thinking about how we're going to prepare staff for that. And for many people, this is something that they really want to do. They want to have their social life back. But for many staff, it isn't as easy. And you need to ensure that they're aware of the safety measures that you've put in place so that their workplace is COVID safe. The obligation legally can extend to how they travel to and from work. So if you have members of staff who are using public transport, who are concerned about that use, you might want to adjust their working hours so that they don't have to come in at peak and busier times. Some staff will be anxious, may have childcare or other obligations, and therefore they will be advocating a phased return. So that's something to think about. And for those staff where there is a continuing issue, perhaps they haven't yet had vaccinations or they're particularly vulnerable, you might be thinking about remote working or putting them on furlough for a period. Where staff have issues, what we have seen is that the best practice is to encourage them to talk about them. We don't want to pry as employers, but at the same time, until you know what the issue is, it's very hard for you to deal with it. And oftentimes we can give reassurance, we can provide information about vaccines, or we can give them some guidance on where they can find further information for the issue that they're dealing with. If somebody did refuse to return to work in the office, then you'd be looking at various options. And as an employer, you have many of them. You might suggest that the staff take some paid holiday or unpaid holiday. We've talked about furlough, and you could put staff on furlough even if they haven't been on before. You can also think about disciplinary action, but beware, if they are not coming to the office because they have a real fear that their workplace is not safe, then that could be seen as an unfair detriment. So you don't want to treat them that way because of that reason. If we could have the next slide, please. You cannot, unfortunately, require your staff to be vaccinated. I know many of us have been hearing from the press that this is the new thing, but Michael Gove has walked that back a little bit and said that consent must be freely given. So we're only going to consult about it right now for the care sector. What we have seen as best practice is that businesses are providing information to their staff. They're talking through obtaining information from doctors about the safety of vaccines and encouraging staff by allowing them time off with pay to be vaccinated. We've talked about detriments. I've mentioned that already. If a staff member is concerned about a health and safety issue, then we shouldn't be taking action against them. What we must do, however, is deal with any data in relation to their vaccination in accordance with GDPR. Many of us will be aware that we have to ensure that any data which is about somebody's medical condition is special category, or we used to call it sensitive data. And therefore we need to make sure that we are dealing with that properly. We're not putting together lists of who's been vaccinated and who hasn't. We are seeing some businesses say, well, we want to encourage people to be vaccinated. We're not going to hire people unless they can demonstrate that they've been vaccinated. We're not going to bring people back unless they've proved that they've been vaccinated. And I think you have to be very careful there. You can only use the health and safety justification that it's reasonably necessary if none of the other measures that you've taken have been sufficient. But most of us in the office have been working quite happily with the hands, face, space and all the other things. So you're sort of implying that that wasn't a safe place to work, which I think would be a dangerous thing to do. If a member of staff refuses to come back to the office and you've done the encouraging piece, you've demonstrated that your workplace is safe, then perhaps you want to think about disciplinary action, and you have to think about whether it's going to be fair and proportionate. Do bear in mind that there will be some categories of staff who will have special protection. They'll have a reason that they're not prepared to be vaccinated, for example. And if that is a philosophical belief, or if they're pregnant, or if they have a medical condition where vaccination is not advised, then of course it would be discriminatory to dismiss them for that reason. So you've got to tread a little bit carefully. Next slide, please. I really wanted to land on the hybrid working and whether this is our new reality. It's our main topic of today. And I think to answer that, it's a typical lawyer's answer. Partly yes, partly no, it depends. In some respects, we have the right already for staff to vary how they work, where they work, what time they work. And they have the right to make a flexible working request. As you'll see from the slide, I have underlined the right to request. It isn't a right to demand, and it isn't a right to actually do the hours that the employee wants to do. But if they qualify and have worked with you for 26 weeks, then you have a duty to reasonably consider what they're proposing. And what they're proposing must address not only the impact on themselves, but the impact on the business and how that is going to be addressed. You have to reply within 3 months, but you have 7 business reasons on which you can refuse an application. So if the work is not available when the staff member wants to work, if it is going to increase your costs to achieve cover, if it will have a detrimental impact on performance, then all of these reasons could be used to say, well, no, that doesn't work. In practice, what we're seeing is an increasing number of businesses saying, well, we've been shown that during the lockdown, flexible working can work. However, we want to do it on a trial basis, or we want to agree a compromise. I did want to touch on the future. In the Queen's speech, we were expecting an employment bill in which working from home would become the default for employees by the end of the year. That wasn't mentioned at all. It had been in previous government literature, and it had been expected last year. So I'm not holding my breath. What is clear to me is that staff are looking at offices in terms of collaboration sites, in terms of places for co-working. Coming into the city is more likely to be about networking, socializing, and building a rapport with your network. It's not necessarily going to be the place that we choose to do most of our work. If we can go to the next slide, please. I think we've all seen that there are challenges of hybrid working, and I'm just going to pick out the 3 top ones because I know Prash is going to go into more detail on this. Some jobs are not suitable for home working. It doesn't work for every role. There will be some people that will need to be office bound most of the time, and that has to be factored into the discussions that we're taking place now. HSBC Chief Exec Noel Quinn has talked about this as the new reality that we are going to be hybrid working. But at the same time, we've seen people like Marissa Meyer at Yahoo saying, well, it doesn't work for us. We're not getting the best out of our people and our culture is suffering. So it's not going to work for every organisation either. Reduce mental well-being. Well, I'm sure that will come out more in the discussion later, but we have the potential for silo working. We have the potential for isolation. And then staff collaboration and cooperation. I mentioned earlier that staff feel that they can be more collaborative and cooperative. But one of the main concerns of the employers who responded to the CIPD research was that staff collaboration would suffer. So there are clearly challenges. Many businesses will have overcome some of the technological ones by providing and investing in new staff, new kit. But we have to think also about things like unconscious bias. And if we can go on to the next slide, Nick. I think there are some legal considerations. When we're looking at output and efficiency, many businesses will adopt KPIs for their workers. We need to make sure they're clearly communicated. If there are core hours when somebody is expected to be available, again, communicate them, make sure they're documented. We need to think about the new normal. How are we dealing with confidential information? Are we ensuring that individuals who are working from home are as secure as the information would be if somebody was office working? We've talked about data already, but we've got data about clients. We might have data about staff. Again, that needs to be secure. And we need to think through the insurance implications. Who's going to own the kit? Who's going to insure the kit? I've mentioned people working in silos and isolated. And I think there is a real risk that some people will not get included. And there is a risk of unconscious bias. If we've got people that will always speak up in meetings on Zoom, then we are more likely to award them the promotion or the bonus or whatever than somebody who is more introverted. And I think we've got to do a lot to train people, train managers and team leads to ensure we address any inequality or anybody who has a particular personality type so that we get the best out of them. And when it comes to collaboration and innovation, I think we've got to think through how we're going to do that. Businesses will have to change their working practices to make sure that they support and sustain their staff. We've been through the flux, we've been through the honeymoon period, and now if this is embedded as our new way of working on a more permanent basis, we've got to think through how we're going to embed culture, how we're going to create that team, and how we're going to drive performance from that team, even though they're located in different places. So one of the things we're suggesting to businesses is to build in a hybrid working policy. Who's going to be able to work from home? When is that appropriate? When is it not? When are they going to be expected to be in the office? And that might be for meetings or team events. You want to set the expectation level, how somebody is going to conduct themselves when they're working virtually, when they're going to be available, and also deal with issues of well-being. We've talked about isolation, and many of the situations that have come up for clients of mine during lockdown have been individuals who perhaps haven't put their camera on. So it hasn't been as obvious when things haven't been going right with them. We need to build in one-to-ones, make sure that we have got clear management and that we are exercising that duty of care, even if a staff member isn't under our nose. I've talked about training of management, but we also need to be training our staff to make sure that they are able to work in a practice which is virtual, maybe virtual part of the time, but certainly virtual on a permanent basis going forward. My last slide, I think. Thank you. If we are looking at hybrid working going forward, then you will need to think about renegotiating and confirming in writing in contracts of employment or letters how that's going to work. Some changes may be formal changes, permanent changes. So if I've made an application to work from home 2 days a week going forward, then that would be something that would need to be changed in writing. It might be informal, that until my second vaccine, I want to work from home and on an impermanent basis. In that situation, you wouldn't necessarily want to put it in writing because it isn't going to apply all the way going forward. But employees need to know the difference. If an arrangement is being made on a temporary basis or on a trial basis, you need to make that clear. And legally, you need to confirm a change of terms and conditions in writing within 1 month of that change. So there will be an exercise for your HR teams to make sure that anybody who is hybrid working actually has the right clauses in their contract. And we need to touch on things like security, confidentiality, the right for you to recoup your equipment if the relationship breaks down, insurance, as we've touched on, but also payment towards their new broadband expenses, their heating costs, and some of those things which possibly have not been covered during lockdown when it was an emergent situation. So I don't think I have any more slides. I am delighted to leave it there, and I will pass back to Dan to have the discussion.
Thanks very much indeed, Melanie. Absolutely great, and I think so much for so many of us to take out of that. Really very, very good indeed. So next we're going to hand over to my colleague Prash, and we'd like to hear some of what you've got to say, Prash. So.
Thank you, Dan, and good afternoon, everyone. Following on from that great presentation from Melanie, I'll be looking at the results of some research carried out by Parkwell, as Dan mentioned, with wealth managers on their thoughts on changing working practices and hybrid working models. So my next slide, please. Firstly, a quick introduction on me. I have a number of years senior level search experience in wealth and asset management. Prior to that, I have a background in front office asset management, managing global equities. On my next slide, for those of you who are new to Parkwell, we are a management consultancy running change and transformation projects for clients with a particular expertise in the private banking, wealth and asset management sectors. And the recruitment arm, led by Dan and myself, have a strong track record hiring key staff across all business functions in these sectors. So on my next slide, let's have a look at some kind of existing challenges that firms are facing. So offices are reopening and businesses are welcoming staff back, but the key thing is the balance between remote and office working structures. That is one that HR and business leaders must get right. And whilst a hybrid working model is widely considered as the way forward, maintaining employee engagement and increasing assets are key challenges. But the pandemic has certainly accelerated technological enhancements, which has been hugely important in connecting with staff and clients. But it is this efficient delivery of technology that is a constant challenge. And the shift to a hybrid working model has meant the need for firms to re-evaluate the needs of their employees and puts an increased focus on well-being and mental health. So on my next slide, we can look at a recent survey conducted by KPMG of their 16,000 UK staff. And 87% of respondents said they liked not having to commute, 76% enjoyed the greater flexibility, and 65% felt they now had a better work-life balance. So I think all of us can appreciate those numbers, but also research generally suggests that key concerns for employees are career advancement, communication, and maintaining a good work-life balance. And it is career advancement that is of more concern to the younger generation. So in research carried out by Parkwell, we spoke to the HR and business leaders of 20 wealth managers to discuss their thoughts on working practices and hybrid working models. And my next slide, please. So all wealth managers suggested that the practical change to remote working was relatively smooth. The challenges have been technology and mindset of individuals. All wealth managers have new forms of communication in place, and 90% of wealth managers we spoke to have accelerated their technological enhancements, both from an operational perspective, but also on the client portal and CRM side of things. All wealth managers have said that increasing assets has been challenging, but most have now got their plans on track. And as Melanie mentioned, compliance, data protection, these are really a continual challenge, and all firms are heavily looking at that on a constant basis and investing in paper technology. Indeed, one wealth manager has been heavily invested in paperless technology and had a paperless office well before the pandemic hit. And I'm sure you'll hear a bit more on that shortly from one of our panel members. So on my next slide, looking at productivity and engagement, all wealth managers surveyed saw no real decrease in productivity. Most have seen an increase, and 15% of wealth managers we spoke to have seen a significant increase in productivity. Most wealth managers have reported an increase in client engagement. Lockdown certainly served as a catalyst for virtual meetings, and obviously there has been no traveling. So clients have adopted these new forms of communication with ease. And it is that the and video meetings, online events, communication hubs have all been very well welcomed in increasing employee engagement. And so what we can say is that certainly these have been very, very useful in keeping people connected. And what some wealth managers have actually carried out anonymous staff engagement surveys to judge current thinking and make improvements. And indeed, from our conversations, generally with clients and candidates, An increasing number of firms are outsourcing their surveys to a third party to reassure employees of complete anonymity and encouraging them all to take part in the survey. So on to my next slide and the hot topic of well-being and mental health. All wealth managers, as indeed all companies out there, see this as a main challenge for HR and business leaders to manage. It is about monitoring staff in the right way and ensuring individuals are not working too much out of traditional office hours. Some wealth managers have encouraged employees to exercise at home through online classes that they provide. Some are letting people log off at 3 p.m. on a Friday, for example, or some are ensuring that they take annual leave and make sure that it happens, for example, take 5 days every 3 or 4 months. So all wealth managers are reviewing their benefits packages with home working orientated and family-friendly benefits being offered. On to my next slide, and most firms we spoke to stopped recruiting, as you can appreciate, as soon as the pandemic started, and it was all about concentrating on communicating with their clients and staff and ensuring that they are happy. In nearly all cases, measured growth plans are now back in place. Some people have struggled at the final interview stages, wanting to meet people face to face, but over the past year, offers have been made and accepted. Thorough referencing in that sense has been key. And now, as the economy reopens, we see it being a very busy summer and pushing into next year. Onboarding new staff has been difficult, but firms soon refined their processes for new employees and encouraged firm-wide introductory virtual meetings to ensure that new employees are integrated into the business. And businesses that have actively grown during the pandemic are well placed to grow further. And on my next slide, please, we can see from our conversations, wealth managers have expressed some concerns and things to be aware of. So the industry has been built, as we know, on strong personal relationships and face-to-face meetings, and new forms of communication have led to a general increase in engagement. But it is about maintaining efficiencies gained from flexible working. That's the ongoing challenge. And one always has to remember that company culture plays a crucial role in employee engagement and talent attraction. What we can say is that, to encourage this cultural change, wealth managers must ensure they provide the right level of training to support that cultural shift towards a digital future. Training programs need to be clear, structured, and accessible to all. A culture built on this continuous learning helps employee engagement and staff retention. On my next slide, a further concern is ensuring that then there are not two tiers of employees. So ensuring managers do not favor those that they see more often in the office. Firms are rethinking their performance processes, as well as how to assess talent in a way that is much more objective and avoids the bias of working from one location versus another. And obviously technology, hugely important that your tech agenda aligns with your employee value proposition. And I'm afraid it is further workload for HR, as they need to work in close partnership with all stakeholders to ensure that the technology creates a basis of efficient working and is in line with company values and sends the right message. So on my next slide, looking at the physical working environment, most companies made changes to their physical office space or are planning to when leases make it possible. In fact, one wealth manager I spoke to has actually closed their London office as the lease timing was right, and they are directing resources to their regional offices in the UK. And as Melanie mentioned, the main change to office space is more collaborative working spaces to encourage employee engagement and interaction with staff. Now, as well as the office, most firms have made significant resources available in terms of chairs, footstools, laptops, desks, and anything else that is needed. But it is about creating a safe and welcoming and easy to access workplace for staff, as that really is key to their happiness, well-being and productivity. So on to my final slide, and the industry is very resilient. The move to working from home has gone easier than many people expected. And most firms report an increase in productivity, and all firms report an increase in engagement. Going forward, people will work from home for 2 or 3 days per week. And it is expected and hoped, obviously, that many of the efficiencies and increased productivity will continue. We have all learnt that you can still operate effectively and still continue to grow a business or change strategy when working from home or in a hybrid working model. And to be honest, the pandemic is likely to advance the industry by a number of years, especially in terms of technological enhancements and client engagement. And finally, if you are agile and maintain efficiencies gained from the past year, you'll be well placed to continue growing and increasing assets. So I hope that has given you some insight on industry views. Thank you very much for listening, and back to Dan.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed, Prash. Very interesting. And as with Melanie, if there's anything you'd like to ask either Melanie or Prash, please do let us know. And there'll be some contact details in the slide packs that we send out. I'm sure they would be delighted to answer any questions you might have. So we will move now on to the final part of this webinar, and we've got about half an hour left, so I won't talk too much. Let's get on with the panel. As I mentioned, Melanie will be rejoining us, but I'd also like to firstly perhaps introduce Eric Moe, the COO of boutique investment management firm Whiteford. Perhaps, Eric, you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, good afternoon, everybody. I think we're all acclimatized now to this Zoom world we live in. Yeah, so as Prash alluded to earlier, we have been a paperless office for the past 7 years. And although we're not going to really talk about that specifically in today's agenda, it really did offer huge opportunities for us to pivot quite quickly from a largely office-based to a remote-based workplace. My background, I'm a technologist. I spent 15 years as a European IT director for a global logistics company. So I'm very comfortable with some of the technology required now to support this new hybrid working environment. And I just look at, with all the hardships that firms and individuals have faced, this is huge opportunity for the likes of businesses such as ourselves to really repurpose and use some of the technology to hand. So I look forward to the panel discussions today.
Great, thanks very much, Eric. And thirdly, I'd like to introduce Sophie Forrest of the Forrest HR Consultancy. She is here to give us a bit of an HR perspective, but perhaps, Sophie, you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your firm.
Yes, of course. Yes. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to Parkwell for having me back again. So Forrest HR, we provide outsourced HR solutions and services to small and medium-sized businesses. We look after a variety of industries, but particularly with the financial and asset management sector. My background is HR for many years. 22 years, and then the consultancy business is about 3.5 years old now, so relatively new, but we look after, as I said, many sort of small businesses who obviously have needed a great deal of support in the areas that we're talking about today. So it'd be great to obviously be able to share some of that insight with the participants today.
Excellent. Thanks very much indeed. So why don't we stick with you, Sophie, and I'm going to ask a sort of a fairly obvious question, but one that perhaps we're all beginning to think about. And that is, when are you likely to kind of go back into the office? When are your clients going back into the office, staggered, straight away, a few days a week, etc., etc.? Be keen to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. So I should obviously just focus on it from a client perspective. We're all quite remote ourselves anyway. But Yeah, I have a couple of FS clients who are already back in, not fully, but they are back in. They've taken a great deal of time and effort and money to ensure that their workspace is safe. They've created, one particular client have created rotas. So they are doing a week in the office and a week from home, and then rotate that. Obviously, you've got different members of staff doing the different rotas to ensure that the number of staff in the workplace at any one time is reduced. But it is also ensuring, you know, that we're sort of moving back into that space of employee engagement with each other, you know, coming out of just being at home. You know, for some it's been great, for some it's been awful. So, you know, it has been ensuring that mix is in place. To get them there, they've followed government guidelines. They've had health and safety risk assessments that we've supported them with. They do the lateral flow testing as well. So they've put quite a lot of time and effort into, you know, ensuring it's a good mix.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. And perhaps I could ask the same of you, Melanie. Oh, Melanie, I think you're muted.
So sorry. Most businesses I'm working with are gradually returning, as Sophie said. You've got pilots going in, and they're obviously segregating their teams so that if there is a further outbreak of COVID in their workplace, then they don't lose all of their staff on site. I think reality is that from the 21st of June, we're going to see more pressure to get our individuals back to the city. And certainly, you know, Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson are very keen to see them vibrant again, and they're spending in those coffee shops and other retail outlets.
Brilliant. Okay. And perhaps, Eric, you'd be kind enough to share some thoughts or details about what you'll be doing.
Sure. We haven't really trialed any sort of return to work policies right now. We continue to work remotely. We're following very closely the UK guidelines. And I think for us, you know, it's back to this point about teams. Absolutely. What we really are trying to do is make our new workplace an attractive place to come back to, knowing that probably our deferred position will be work from home unless you have a very good reason to come into the office. So I think really that's going to drive this whole approach with teams, where we don't want, you know, 75% of the team to come in and 25% to remain, you know, remote. We want all teams to be in the same place. So it is forcing us to look at our current COVID compliance with the workforce. We maintain, even though our office is empty and has been since March, you know, we have 2 COVID cleaning events, for example, per week and things like that. So it's really just kind of reassuring staff that, you know, we're staying on top of all the requirements around personal safety.
Okay. I might just sort of just follow on with you, Eric, on that. And this, I suppose, is going a little bit back to what you've been doing. But have you put much in place for staff who are working at home at the moment?
Oh, absolutely. So
from I guess everything. I guess I'm talking both from, you know, computers and desks to that sort of thing. The opposite of the sort of the office environment.
Yeah, so we haven't cannibalized our office in the sense of, you know, you could walk in our office and say, yeah, we're ready to go. So we spent a lot of time getting things like Surface Pro laptops out to staff. Really, no request was refused, right? If they wanted an extra monitor, they got one. You know, if they wanted a more comfortable office chair, they got one. So it was very much in support of the well-being of the staff, knowing that they're in a different work environment. Even, you know, things like we purchased desks, for example, where they didn't have a appropriate workspace. So I think for us, because we have been in this virtual desktop environment, and I think Sophie referred to that as well, that is my new way of working now. So I do not make any distinction from their work environment at home to coming into the office in these team meetings, because for me, they will be working in this virtual environment, which gives us a lot of options in terms of asset redeployment and also data security and cybersecurity as well, which you cannot overlook when you have a deployed workforce.
Brilliant, thanks. Sophie, did you see much from your clients in terms of helping them out with desks or working environments at home? And what do you see as the future of that? Are people going to keep that, or is it going to change, or is it, you know, I don't know, back to the dining room table?
Yeah, no, I think I think that you know, even on a dining room table, you know, we've been working very closely as part of our offerings for our clients with a company that do like home workspace assessments, and you know, equally like what as Eric had said, you know, if within reason, if you know, if there was, you know, justified equipment that was needed, you know, certainly for some of the smaller organizations, then it was supplied. And I think that's helpful to have these experts who are able to do the DSE risk assessments and desk assessments, you know, at home. You know, without keep saying the word risk assessment, it, you know, there have been a lot of those you know, developed for our clients, from a standard health and safety to a remote working, you know, obviously covering data protection stuff as well, but you know, covering all of those elements to make sure that the workplace at home is a suitable one.
Yeah. Okay, great, thanks. Perhaps I could ask you, Melanie, on that same sort of tip, but is there anything legally you think people should know about in terms of home offices, sending out desks, etc., etc.?
Definitely. Sophie's already touched on desk assessments. We're having a huge increase in staff saying, I'd like to have my annual eye test voucher, please, because my eyes seem to have got worse over the last year with all the screen use. So that's one of the first things we're seeing. We're also seeing employers having to make sure that their staff are taking breaks. We're not in France with a right to disconnect at a certain time, but we are seeing employers try to put in Wellness Wednesday or have a break on a Tuesday lunchtime and go for a walk, so that staff are actually taking the mandatory breaks in the working time regulations. And the last thing I'd mention is really thinking about how staff are dealing with this lockdown and the possible isolation anxieties that they have. Lots of businesses have been pumping out an awful lot of information about their employee assistance programs and making sure that staff are as supported as they can be for their mental health.
Okay, great. Thanks, Melanie. So that's very good. Perhaps I'm going to change things, move things along a bit in terms of what we're speaking about. And I wanted to ask you a bit about new business development. I mean, certainly in wealth management, that's something that traditionally has been done very much face to face. Now, I understand both Sophie and Melanie, you're not necessarily in that specifically, but I think it would be interesting. You're both dealing with both wealth managers, but people outside that. And I wondered if there's anything you'd heard about the change in new business development, if it's being done virtually, is it being done in different sort of ways, and what sort of difference have you seen to that? And perhaps I'll go straight back to you, Melanie, with that, if that's okay.
Yes, I think the statistics are saying that those of us who have got very close networks have amplified those relationships. We've deepened them, but that on the fringes networking has been much more difficult. On the plus side, being able to have virtual meetings means that there's less time taken for us to meet with prospects. So I think across wealth management, across the legal environment, you know, in every way, there is a time saving, and therefore people are more likely to take a meeting than they previously would have been. The depth of the connection, I think, is harder to achieve without the face-to-face, but that's my anecdotal impression.
Yeah, no, I think you're probably right. Sophie, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Melanie about that depth of that forming that relationship. It's you know, it's difficult to fully achieve that, but I think at first it was probably a bit difficult, but we adjusted, so quickly. And, thank goodness for the Zoom and, Teams and all of the other video call facilities, because that has helped with, keeping that business development moving. I've definitely seen a change over the last month or two. More face-to-face business meetings are happening, maybe more from that, that business development, a bit more than a networking, but it's definitely coming back.
Brilliant. And what about at Whiteford, Eric? How's business development been affected by this?
Well, I do echo Stephanie's sentiments about, it is about building network. I think what was interesting for us is, back to this point about the time dividend that you may get from working from home, it's helped us in some ways on more of a product development strategy, perhaps less so on business development. So it's allowed us to really look at launching some new products and other things that perhaps, previously you didn't have that time to focus on, because we are continually looking at ways to grow the business. And one of those ways is new products alongside business development.
Brilliant.
But yeah, I think, for me, I'm getting more and more, for example, ways, entry points, be it through LinkedIn, people are trying to create some of those relationships, and to what degree of effect, I don't know. I don't really respond well to LinkedIn, for example, but I do rely more on my trusted and my personal network.
Okay, interesting. One thing we've all heard a lot about, and that's actually mentioned a great deal this afternoon, is the work-life balance. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about stuff that you put in place in your offices over the last year or so. Maybe I'll come straight back to you, Eric, on that.
Oh, I'm passionate about this. So, one of the accelerants for me has been bringing in more collaborative technology, right? So in March of last year, I deployed Slack because I saw my personal email box growing exponentially in terms of the volume of messages that would have been these communications I would have had either, in the kitchen or whatever. So, but I didn't do really a structured rollout. I just thought people would be curious about it and just kind of let it loose in the organization. And some people really liked it, others just didn't. Now, fast forward, I'm working on a very structured Teams rollout. And really, for me, I'm very excited about channels, right? Because very much micro projects are very well suited to channels. And I'm just trying to reduce reliance on email as a primary form of communication, because it has its role, but other times I think it really is it's a distraction. So that's, I guess, my big push right now. And I'm getting traction. So I'm very excited about it.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny. Email really is, it's taking up an awful lot of time for a lot of people. And I think anything we can find to divert something away from that is a good idea. Sophie, what about a work-life balance with you?
Yeah, from a client perspective or from
or both?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important, as Eric has said, and we, a lot of our clients are really thinking out of the box with a lot of things. Of course, they have your standard, stand down periods where they are requesting that you, take time out of your day, and with your quizzes and other activities that you're also going to do. But I think one of the things that's been quite helpful for a lot of staff is that they've, where they are able to maybe, attend to some errands and stuff as well, that definitely helps with their work-life balance, because it's just giving them, they've been given a bit of a gift of time with certain things now, where they're able to be working from home, which can only be a benefit.
Brilliant.
Sophie, just to that point, one of the things I find really helpful as, a senior manager, I'll say at 2 p.m., hey, I'm going out to the shops, I'll be back in half an hour. And I think, you've kind of moved away from that traditional lunch shower. And I think it really sends a good message to staff as well that, hey, it's okay to, take that walk with the dog or whatever. And it's tone from the top, I think, is hugely important.
I fully agree. I do a lot of calls, with people as well, and they sometimes will say, you sound like you're out. Yeah, I'm just walking the dog. I'm walking the dog, and I'm able to have a call at the same time. And that's okay. Or if one of my team says that they're doing it, and they're like, oh, sorry, yeah, I'm just out. No, don't apologize. Like, do that. That's a good thing for you to be doing.
Well, I've got a couple of lawyers in my family, and let me tell you, the work-life balance pre-COVID was something they were famously poor at. So I'd be fascinated to see what Melanie has to say about the work-life balance.
I think it's been an absolute blessing for work-life balance. The one thing I would say is I am seeing a trend of people and leaders, team leads and execs having complaints made against them because then they are working later and creating the expectation that staff will work later, or at least staff feel that they are being required to work later. So I think that it's been fantastic. You can fire things off at 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. But I think we have got to be careful that our staff, taking Eric's point about leading from the top, thinking, I've got to respond to this now. And there is an undercurrent where staff are starting to feel a little bit of pressure to do the same.
Yeah, actually, I've seen my wife works for a bank, and some of her emails say underneath them, I'm sending this at a time that's convenient to me. Please do not feel you need to respond straight away.
That's a great way to deal with it. And sometimes with my clients, I'll see my clients and they'll say, you can look at this tomorrow morning, that's fine, which is exactly the right thing to do, create the proper expectation.
It doesn't say that on the text she sends me, I must say, but there we go. That's a different matter altogether. So in terms of sort of working from home and employee engagement and that kind of thing, I wondered if you'd come across interesting ways that people have tried to up the employee engagement. I know it's an important thing in people's lives. I wondered, should I start with you, Sophie? I imagine you've seen a bit of that.
Yeah, we've seen quite a lot of interesting suggestions, and I think it is just about exploring those. We have for some of the smaller clients who maybe aren't going into their office, they're doing some stuff in serviced offices as well, and other areas where they can all get together as a group, and yeah, just as I briefly sort of touched on it with some of the quizzes, on a Friday afternoon, having a meeting, bringing a drink along to the meeting, cocktail of the week and things like that. There's been, variety of those sorts of things as well.
Okay, brilliant. Eric, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say we're probably about 12, 13 months into this whole engagement surveys that are run by a company, which gives staff the ability to reply anonymously through a series of questions. So this survey may take anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. And it's been quite interesting because we can see trends now. So, every quarter that staff get one, and you get their percentage of engagement levels. And it also gives the heads of department and the managers the ability to look at the tone and follow it up with like town halls, weekly meetings, one-to-ones, things like that. So it's very much having to maybe spend more time engaging than pre-pandemic, but you can't overlook it. This is definitely something we need.
Brilliant. I'm conscious that we've moved along quite a bit, and we've only got sort of 5 minutes left. So I wonder if I might sort of finish the questions with just really to ask each of you, what is perhaps the thing that you've noticed change most during the pandemic that you will be looking to continue with? I don't know whether it's working from home or whatever it might be, but the one sort of standout thing that you think, people from both an HR perspective, a new business, whatever it might be, have really gained from the pandemic? And I'll start with you, Melanie, if that's okay.
I'm going to push it. I'm going to ask for two. I think working from home is the obvious shift.
Yeah.
I think second of all, the acceptance it's not a presenteeism culture anymore.
Brilliant. Sophie.
Yeah, no, I agree. Obviously, of course, the working from home, and I think it's also the virtual meetings, and also, you know, alongside with that, with training. So just that availability to have stuff through a virtual, through the Zoom and Teams, and I think it's made it so much more convenient to have, you know, meetings quickly, getting in front of clients quickly, rather than having to, you know, book that in physical terms. So yeah, that for me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sophie. And finally to you, please, Eric.
I'll just boil it down to one word, is adaptability. And what we have asked our employees to do over the past, 14 months has been nothing short of extraordinary. They've risen to the challenge. They've adapted quite quickly. We've been with them on this journey. And I think when I start to put in more change initiatives and things like that, I have, a workplace that's predisposed to being more responsive to new changes. So again, I think it's fantastic. And I'm quite excited about the next 6-9 months in particular, because we are reshaping our organization for this new environment.
Brilliant. Thanks very much to all of you on the panel. We wouldn't really be able to do these things without you, so it's very much appreciated. Certainly sort of listening to you, and when Prash and I were out doing some research, speaking to the firms, it struck me really that the wealth industry has really stood up to the pandemic very well, put some great things in place very quickly. And I think moving forward, both technologically, seem to have improved relations with staff. And it feels as if there's a really sort of solid framework now for us to build moving forward. And it looks like it could be a really exciting summer as we push through. So all that remains for me to do is to thank all of you for joining us, thank the panel again, and just to remind you that we will be doing another one of these later in the year. It's a big one for us. It's about remuneration, and that's in September. There will be a few of you, I'm sure I will be speaking to before that with a few questions. And then in terms of a firm, we have the Compere yearly review in June, and ESG reporting a bit later on in June. But I'm sure you'll all be hearing about that. So thanks very much for me. Again, thanks to the panel, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Take care. Goodbye.
Thank you.